what? We looking into everything. So I know y'all love when I do what I like to call show and tell, right? Because I mean, I feel like when we was younger, we all used to enjoy a little bit of show and tell, right? So on one show and tell, I was able to show you my old Iraq most wanted cards. And another live, I was able to show you my Pakistan law sketchbook pages, right? And I kind of felt like there were some things I kind of wanted to perfect with that method, especially as far as showing it to you guys. So what I did was the last live I did, I put something on the screen. I got good feedback in the comments, so I'm back again to show y'all something real time I've been working on. Right now, I am in the criminal law studies, right? And for anybody that knows me, I tend to do a little bit of comparative law lens on a lot of material, right? So I'm studying University of London, and right now with me studying the criminal law process, I've been seeing that there are some differences with how the United States applies, that common law structure in comparison to like how the UK, from specifically like that Wales English structure, right? So instead of trying to like fight the system and keep telling my brain, oh, wait, no, 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 you're doing that wrong, you're processing that wrong, that's not correct. I've been more so looking to identify patterns, right? So I've been kind of somewhat issue spotting, if you will, my process. And what I found very, very interesting, it wasn't really the process that I was doing wrong. It wasn't even really the procedure per se that I was doing wrong. I think my brain was categorizing things in the wrong pockets, right? Because really, that's a US structure of doing things, and then there's like a UK. It's realistically, it's like the same kind of structure, but it's some different movements, some different steps by different people. And as you can imagine, if you're putting the wrong piece of the puzzle in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're going to end up with a different thing. Just like I said when I started the channel, legally everywhere. Sometimes you go to different location, legally everywhere, right? Because when you go to different locations, you can change the outcome of like of what your action might mean because you're in a different place, right? So, how can I further explain that? How can I further explain that? I would use the difference of saying like when I was doing foreign language, when I was younger, earlier, I guess you can say my educational career, I started off with Spanish, right? And then I switched to French. So because I had that Latin root, I noticed that as I was learning the language, sometimes, right, I would miss, or better yet, I would miss certain opportunities. I would do something, I guess as you would say, incorrectly, with regards to communication, right? Because I wasn't technically translating it correctly. In theory, I would still be saying the correct thing. So if they said hi, I would be saying hi back, right? But the problem was I wasn't putting it in the correct language. So as far as the person who's interacting with me, I said it incorrectly. But in actuality, the process, the way that I was doing it in my mind was actually correct. Now, application, when you're supposed to be communicating with somebody, yes, you would like to communicate with them the correct way. So you need to put that in the correct categories, the right packaging. So I kind of like had to remind myself that that is something that does occur, right? The process of doing it. Let's say if it was language, the conjugation, the diction, the way I was putting it was correct. It wasn't incorrect. It's just I need to finish out that whole setup. So instead of me letting my brain say, oh, you messed up, just stop what you're doing it wrong, I had to identify what is my brain actually doing and how can I make modifications so that my learning process feels a little bit more comfortable. So I wanted to show y'all what my little show and tell was looking like. And essentially, for me, that was adding an additional page to my note-taking process, which literally ended up turning into the comparative law elements. So as I was working on my notes, which you guys know I tend to draw like visual pieces, and then I kind of like put it into the system so that I can um, have something that looks nice. I can put as my background on my phone and kind of continue to study and have that repetition. I get to kind of show you guys what that looks like. Hopefully you enjoy it. I'll do a little bit of explanation if you have some questions. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of show you, you know, y'all my people. And I'm always excited to show you guys. Sorry, I took a little mucinous. My nose is all messed up because, as you know, I'm telling you about the smoke and the allergies and breathing. Hello. If y'all been following my other lives. So, been feeling a little off. But I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm so excited to show y'all because for me, it was just such a boom. Okay, I get it now, right? Because literally, like I said, it was kind of like that translation. I was doing it correctly because we have to do quizzes and whatnot. And when I was doing the quizzes, I was like, why am I getting certain information wrong? Because I know this material. Listen, as much as I've been looking at this material, I'm like, I know this material. And I had to realize, oh, okay, you know what? You were thinking about the U.S., you were kind of coming at from a U.S.-centric mindset. You were thinking about the United States of America structure. You're not actually fully processing that this question needs to 100% line up with the UK structure. So let me go ahead and put it up on screen. And I'll show you what my comparative law bridge looks like. So for me, it's page 3. I wanted to add it kind of earlier. Originally, when I actually added it, it was like page 7. So I had to go back and redo it. But I'm going to show y'all what that looks like. Y'all ready? Let me see. Is there anything in chat before I start? Okay. So once a good hello. Hello to you all. It doesn't allow me to respond like directly to you guys. But just know I am saying greetings and salutations to you all. I know some people are like super early in the morning. Some people are somewhat late. Hopefully that is visible to you. Can you see it? It's also the cover for this. Can you see it? If I do it like that, is that a little bit more visible? Tell me what works for y'all. I can scoot her up a little bit. I'm actually going to get a stand for this, but I can't have it on what it was before. You wouldn't be able to see that and me be able to kind of talk. So I'm going to show you this part. I just put my piece at. I use my other pen. Okay, so if you look here, can y'all see? We'll do this. So this is my comparative law. Can y'all see that on the screen? So basically, different systems with similar goals, and that's the same pursuit of justice, right? So for me, the biggest thing was not fighting how my brain thinks and how my brain processes things. Because in actuality, they are very similar systems, right? They have similar goals, but similar is not the same. And I always have to make sure I anchor that in how I'm processing. So you have England and Wales, which is like the UK, and then you have the United States. So I put that visual image there. And I did add it at the cover in case you guys want to do like a quick little screenshot for yourself. You're welcome to it. So what I found interesting was for the UK, I'm just going to say UK when I'm talking about England and like Wales, right? Your first point would be the police investigations. If you're coming from a US-centric mindset, sounds very familiar, right? So the police investigate the alleged offense and gather evidence, right? Very similar to what we do in the United States, which is police investigate the alleged crime and collect evidence. Okay. Same pretty much thing going on there. As you can see, part 2 automatically changes a step in movement, right? So that movement automatically starts to look different because you have what's called a Crown Prosecution Service, which you'll see me put throughout the rest of my notes as CPS. Not to be confused in the United States when we say CPS, is not Child Protective Services. This is Crown Prosecution Service, right? You think of prosecution, you know, like the one who is accusing someone and, going about charging someone, right? So you have the Crown Persecution, my apologies, Prosecution Service, right? And it decides whether there is sufficient evidence and whether it is in the public's interest to prosecute, which I thought was very interesting. So whether it's in the public's interest to actually prosecute. There's some other distinguishing things that I'm going to bring up too, but that's the step 2, right? So similarly, to a degree, right, it's not exactly the same, but you have the second movement for the United States being the prosecutor. It's like your prosecuting attorney or whatever, your district attorney. The prosecutor decides whether to file the criminal charges. You can already slightly hear that there's a slight difference, right? Because they're saying at this level, they're automatically deciding if there's sufficient evidence and whether it is in the public's interest to prosecute at step 2 in the UK. But in the United States, it's deciding, the prosecutor decides whether to file criminal charges. So I already was like, okay, that's interesting. So then we go to the third step with the UK side, right? So you go police investigation, Crown Prosecution Service. We're going to once again call that what? CPS. Then you have the magistrate's court, right? So this is going to start to sound different to someone who's coming from the U.S. centric mindset, right? Because the magistrate's court says first, okay, magistrate's court files a court hearing, usually determines bail, hearing, and case management, right? That's not typically how we hear someone refer to a magistrate, but that's exactly what happens there. That actually doesn't sound too far off from our process, but we definitely call it something different. So in the U.S. structure, it goes police investigation, prosecutor, or like the district attorney, same step. Third would be initial appearance. So then you go, defendant is informed of charges, rights, and bail is set. So as you can see, they have that first court hearing, right? So the other person, in my apologies, the UK structure, they're having that first court hearing, right? Determine bail, hearing, and case management. From the US side, they're saying the defendant is informed of charges or rights and bail is set. A little bit different in what's happening, right? It's similar, but it's not, the same. So what I found interesting is like there's other pieces that go into that, right? So when you talk about the magistrate court, they're tried in a magistrate court, so punishable by less serious sentencing only, right? So there's 2 separate pieces to that. And then there's the either way offenses, which the magistrates may try or they send to the Crown Court if it's like more serious offense. So there are certain situations that they're not going to address at this court level where they have to go to the next court. But there are some things where like, hey, we do this here. So that was, an interesting element that's brought at this particular level, right? Different than how they might do it in that U.S. structure that I'm a little bit more familiar with. So then when you go over to the U.S. side, it's like the preliminary hearing or like your grand jury. And you talk about probable cause hearing before a judge or an indictment by like a grand jury, depending on the situation. Okay. So that's the fourth movement, right, on the U.S. side. The fourth movement on the UK side would be the Crown Court, which are serious offenses. Serious offenses are tried pretty much here by a judge and jury. Keep in mind, for things that aren't considered necessarily serious charges, the magistrate court typically will handle that before it gets there. Whereas we notice on the U.S. side, it talks about being tried by a judge and jury, right? So here's what's happening here. We'll go to movement 5, trial court, trial in state or federal court, depending on, once again, what's going on there, bench or jury trial. Then we go to the fifth movement here. On the UK side, you have appeals. It's going to be appeals on the other side too, but like appeals, which may go to the Crown Court on point of law, and then to the Court of Appeals or like Supreme Court, right? With the US side, you have appeals to an immediate appellate court, then possibly to like the state Supreme Court or the US Supreme Court. So you can see how it's like similar, but it's not the same. And that's how it was tying me up a little bit, because when I was getting some of the questions, I was like, wait a minute, I'm following this, I'm doing it right. But as you remember, like at the beginning, when I gave like my comparison, it kind of reminds me when I had studied foreign language and, some years passed, and they always say if you don't use it, you lose it. And I was sitting there and I was on vacation actually, and someone was speaking French, and they were like, literally, there was this really sweet older couple who was sitting on the bus, and they were freaking out because they were thinking they were going to miss their bus stop. And we were traveling. It was I think it was actually in Vegas, and I can completely understand everything that they were saying. I was nervous about communicating back with them because I was like, "Ooh, I haven't practiced French in a while." Um, I did communicate at a more basic level than what I had been familiar with speaking at in French, but I actually had some moments where I was communicating with them in Spanish, but they did not speak Spanish, right? So it's important to kind of like know how to place things in the proper category, because I was giving them the correct information when my brain converted it over to what that foreign language that I was speaking, but I was not necessarily putting it in the correct category. Yes, technically my brain did the correct thing. Like, hey, I'm saying the correct sentence, the correct words, but not in the correct language that they needed for it to be proper. So that's why I thought it was super important that I added like a comparative bridge, because I had to remind myself those are things that actually happen. You can absolutely understand the material. Let me sit this down a little bit. I can't wait till I get that second piece to put this, because I think this will look nice on here with you guys. It's like you can 100% like understand the material, but if you don't put it the correct way, you can really mess yourself up, especially when something is so prescriptive like law. You want to know exactly what you're supposed to be saying, exactly describing it the right way, right? I always think about like the uh Johnny Cochran like quote, wait, that everyone knows is very, especially like in the US, I feel like it's one of those pivotal things. But if it doesn't fit, you must have quit, right? So it has to fit perfectly, right? You can't just be like, oh, I kind of think I got it. This piece might go here, might. It has to fit perfectly. It has to meet the standard, right? So it was really important to me to make sure that I created like that comparative bridge. It's almost like a form of translation, if you will, to make sure that my brain was processing it right as I'm learning it. Because that's how I am. Like I tell y'all all the time, how I learn it is how I'm going to remember it. That means that's how I'm going to apply it. So I got to make sure I put all those good steps in place pretty early on, right? So, some key comparisons. I want to give y'all some of my nuggets. Let's see. Like the Crown Prosecution Service and like your district attorney, so that like level 2, both decided whether like to prosecute. But what's interesting is the Crown Prosecution Service works independently of like the police. So that one feels a little interesting, right? Because from a U.S. perspective, you kind of see there being a little bit more of a relationship of them kind of working through like more like a team or pieces of a larger team, so to speak. So that's like a uniqueness that I was going to have to kind of remind myself to keep that in alignment. Um, Magistrate court and like the U.S. magistrate judge are not the same. That is not like a congruent situation there. So the magistrate court is a trial court for many offenses, right? Usually the smaller ones. And like the U.S. magistrate judge handles preliminary matters. So if that kind of like makes sense there. I kind of was bringing it up early, but if y'all kind of get where I'm flowing. And then you have like the crown court is like your serious criminal trial court. So they handle the most serious cases. And this is specific to like UK, like England, Wales. Um, like how like state and federal courts typically do in the US, which was interesting because once again, like these are different titles. So you kind of got to be cognizant and remember those pieces, which is the part that kind of has my brain like, you know? And then you have like the jury trial. Let's see. It's like available in both processes, or I should say both systems for serious offenses, but the process and the rules they differ. Let's see, the appeal structure, both systems allow multiple levels of appeal. But the courts and the process, those vary as well. So my biggest takeaway was like different names, different steps, same purpose. Right? Different names, different steps, same purpose. And honestly, we're talking about 5 main steps for the UK, 6 for the US. I would say the first 2 are pretty consistent on both sides, and then the very last one is pretty consistent. But a couple of those steps that are in between are, you know, distinct enough where, you feel the difference and enough that could trip you up if you were taking like an exam, how like I plan to eventually. So that plays a factor. So what I would say is the same as a point of reference, like police investigation, that is the same. Prosecutors decide whether to charge, court hearings and trial. Defendant has rights. Appeals are possible. The goal is to seek justice and protect the public, right? Well, that's the same. So that's my comparative little lens that I put on what I was studying. Like leveraging your background, whatever that may be, right? I started off as someone who is US centric, someone who grew up familiar with the criminal justice system, family members that worked in the criminal justice system, studying as a criminal justice student for my undergraduate degree, working in corrections for almost a decade post having a master's, and then pursuing law school, right? So leveraging your background because there is very vital information that we all kind of have. There's always transferable skills, transferable information and knowledge, and kind of not being afraid to lean into that. I sometimes feel like you're like, oh, I need to just start from scratch. I just need to start from scratch. No, there's such beauty in harnessing like your own background and saying, okay, what unique vantage point do I come from and how can I honor that and incorporate it while still making sure that I'm very much on top of what I need to know and making sure that I'm learning the information the way I need to learn it. That's been fun. I always have this quote that I love to put on stuff. I used to paint it on everything, but the beauty, is in the attempt. I love allowing myself to just process things and to be a part of it, be in the moment of things. So I have actually done this study guide. I've been this one I'm calling like an atlas because of the way I'm structuring it. The previous one I just called an outright sketchbook. But these are like sketchbook pages. These are my notes and outlines. I have fun with allowing my brain to fully venture out, right? how do I see this? And I acknowledge that maybe in some months from now, I might see it a little differently, but I like the way that I'm anchoring it, the way that I'm understanding it now. And I love to put it in visual presentations, try to share it with people. Back in the day, to torture probably my siblings, asking them if I can just like share what I was learning to make sure that I understand it. Now there's a whole study they do around stuff like that, but I had been doing that since I was younger. I love to take the information, share it with folks, have them kind of recite it back to me or talk back to me, ask me questions so that I can make sure that I have anchored it correctly, that I understand. Because if I'm not able to answer questions, then it's time to get back to the books. So I decided I was gonna just share that with y'all. Y'all my people. And I said anytime I get some stuff and I can do a little show and tell, I'm always gonna do a little show and tell. As you can see, this is what I have been working on. So that is one page of my studies and my notes. Keep in mind, y'all know me, every time I have one of these classes, I typically have like at least 12 to 15 pages, something like this. I can actually show you the first page, which is more like the foundations. Let's see. The big picture page. So the first page. And this is kind of like this, if you will. So if you look right here, this is like a 60-second understanding. So pretty much like criminal law determines when the state may punish an individual for conduct that harms society. Every offense follows the same framework. Identify the prohibited conduct, right? The things you're not supposed to be doing. So the actus reus. Determine the required mental state, which is, the mens rea, and determine whether a successful defense prevents criminal liability, right? So this page shows where every future topic fits into the framework. And you can kind of see that from right there, right? So this is that metro map, if you will, right? Because I told you it's going to be my little atlas. So you have the foundations, the offenses, and the defenses, right? So the foundations is criminal liability, actus reus, mens rea, burden of proof, standard of proof. Like those are foundational pieces when you're talking about criminal law. And the offenses, like, what type of offense did they, what kind of action did they take, right? What was that prohibited action? So you have homicide, you have assault, theft, fraud, criminal damage, public disorder, inoculate offenses like attempted conspiracy, indictment, stuff like that. Then you have defenses, right? So those things that potentially could get somebody off, you know what I mean? So pretty much we're talking about that successful defense, which prevents what criminal liability, things that could potentially get someone to say, well, they may not be criminally liable because of what self-defense, consent, duress, necessity, insanity, automatism, mistake. Because in theory, that mens rea, like, their mental state, if they had intention to harm, that's a big factor outside just did you do it. The question is, did you mean to harm? There's this one example they have us right on where the person engaged in theft, as they call it, right? There's a suspicion of theft, but the question became whether the person will be charged based on if the person wanted to permanently hold the item, right? And it was determined the person didn't want to permanently hold the item. So then the question was, could you charge them with theft? The actual answer was no, you could not, right? If it doesn't fit, you must what? You must acquit. So that was one of those things I kind of kept as an anchor, like for that particular case. No, you can't just be like, oh, we're going to give you a lesser charge. No, they didn't meet the standard for theft. The question was theft. They did not meet the standard, right? That's what I'm saying, like being very prescriptive and understanding to put things in certain categories. You're like, well, wait, let me see what else we can put. That's not how that go. At least for the purpose of like this study. Liabilities state may punish, right? Only when all elements are proven. And then you can see a little bit, if you look there, that I did kind of add some of the comparative bridge here early on as well. But pretty much one of the big things I wanted to pull from this page was that, which is the main page, the first page, if you will, introduction. Every criminal law problem begins with the same three questions, right? And those three main questions fall under foundations, offense, and defense, right? Being what happened, right? What was the defendant's like thinking? Very important. And is there a successful legal defense? So once again, and you can see I color coded. So like foundations and this question portion, like what happened, those are the same color because that's the same question, same line of thought. And then it's like the offenses. So what was the defendant thinking? Is there a successful legal defense? If you follow my channel at all, you know I have a Legally Everywhere framework. I found that it lined up pretty well with what I'm studying right now. So every topic that's on here, I try to also add some elements of my Legally Everywhere framework. And it's why is the behavior in itself criminal, right? So every page I'm trying to like identify that, but also every time I look at something, these are questions I'm always trying to ask. The question becomes, why is the behavior criminal? Who is being protected? What harm is the law trying to prevent? Because keep in mind, depending on like which jurisdiction too, the question was, you know, like what was the harm to the public? So what harm is the law trying to prevent? What legal value is being balanced? Let's see. How does this compare to the United States? Y'all know I'm always trying to do the comparative law. And essentially just keeping to the mindset that different systems, same human need for justice. Irregardless of that, it's just like looking at it and saying, okay, it's a different system, but we're kind of addressing the same like human need for justice. That's why it's structured a certain way. The intent is to be fair. The intent is to protect, you know, people from harm. So that is the structure. So that's my map. What do y'all think? Let me look at the chat. I might have a couple more minutes, but yeah. Yes, welcome back. Munch Oreos. Welcome back. Let me go ahead and sound off in the chat. So I see a Sherry or Sharif. My apologies. Hi. Lillian. Hi. Munch Oreos. Hi. And I see other people maybe didn't put something in the chat, but for all people who were able to type something in the chat, hello, hello. Hopefully you're enjoying my criminal law comparative law angle, pretty much from the United States to the UK, little comparative lens from what I've been studying. My brain told me, you better put that in there now. So I decided to go ahead and do that. Right? 3 questions. So the anchor that I made also for this page was learning to think like a criminal lawyer, because every course is going to have their main focus. So I'm like, okay, like this, if I was trying to mentally prepare myself to be a criminal lawyer, like what exactly is this course training me to think and look for and prepare for? So that's how I mapped this out. What do you think? Are you guys, did you find that like helpful? Did you find it interesting? I'm always interested as I share what I've been building and working on, what you guys think. I can show you some of the other pages, but I'm going to be like updating them. So kind of don't know if I want to put it up. That's too far in advance. Let's go with 3. So just so you can kind of see, this is another page. So actus reus is pretty much the act itself. It's the external element of an offense, right? The physical act, it consists of a conduct, an act, or an omission, right? So the fact that you either acted or you didn't do something you're supposed to do. which is interesting that like either you did it or you didn't do something. And then 2, any circumstance that make the conduct like wrong, and any then 3 will be any result required by the offense. So normally there must be a voluntary act, but there are important exceptions, which I kind of start to put, right in here, which is statutory omission offenses, possession offenses, and situational like liability. And there was a specific case that kind of made us write about with regards to possession offense. It's actually an interesting case that came out in 2023, relevant to opiates. Trigger alert. So yeah, so like I said, like I like to try to make things very visual because that's just how I operate. Everyone has their own thing that they're doing in their own way that they like to look at stuff, but I know this helps me. And then I also take things like this, I, put it in my background, put it on my screen, share it, update it, modify it again. I think this one will mostly stick the same. I'm gonna make a slight tweak to it. But it's not gonna be anything major. You can see I kind of color coded for certain topic areas. Just so once again, there's like science behind why I'm doing it that way. But I just wanted to be very comfortable anchors. I don't want to cause my brain any stress. I want when I see things, patterns, and connections, I want to be like, oh no, that's supposed to be there. And my brain is anchored that way. So that was just me just sharing. Sharing is caring. I'm willing to answer any questions. You get any questions about the specific thing that I showed today. And once again, I just want to thank you all for, the engagement, getting on the chat. I know this is a much later live than I typically would do, but I just said, you know what? I had something for my people. I had a show and tell, and I'm going to go ahead and show it and tell it. So I'm excited to share. You guys know I'm so excited to do a little bit of info dumping whenever I can. But once again, I just think it's so important to share information. I didn't study for the purpose of just me knowing, but I thought it would be nice to share and make sure the community kind of knows certain information. I don't think things should always be so gatekept. So I share as I come across things I think people would be interested in. If there's things you guys are interested in, always feel free to put it in the chat. If it's something I have access to, or even something I believe to be in public domain that I can give access to, I'll share it with you guys. I'm one for doing that. So once again, this is Legally Everywhere. Well, what y'all, we looking into everything. This is my YouTube channel called Legally Everywhere. This is what you would see if you go to my channel directly. I know that I'm coming across your live feed, but if you go into my channel directly, this is the channel logo. Like, comment, subscribe if you're interested. I do assure you that there are lots of interesting content on my channel. I have the Legally Everywhere framework, where we kind of look at news through a certain lens and we kind of gather information, we share, we converse, we talk about it. I think it's more important to allow ourselves to feel informed. I think sometimes people in society rather makes it feel uncomfortable to ask questions, but there's nothing wrong with asking questions. And guess what? If something doesn't make sense, you know what? It's probably a reason it don't make sense. Sometimes be like, oh, that don't make sense. You know what? It's probably a reason it don't make sense. And keep asking questions until something do make sense. And if it makes sense, but it sound wrong, now you know what to do. Something. To do something. Now, what you do is up to you, but to do something. I think a lot of times people just make people uncomfortable asking questions because they don't want you to feel empowered to engage in action. But once you have, information, you're equipped with information, you're more comfortable making an action. You're making an informed decision. So I just implore people to just be informed at the best of your ability, so that when you have an opportunity to engage, when you have an opportunity to act, when you have an opportunity to do, you're able to do just that. You're able to act. And When it comes from a mental health perspective, like your emotional well-being, your emotional wellness, when you feel informed, adequately informed to engage, you're able to cope with outcomes a lot better than if you had not been properly informed or given any proper preparation to engage. So that's why I'm always saying, hey, whatever information I can share, I share it, because I never know what you need. Just like you ain't never know what you need, but it's nice to know that you got access to it if you shall need it. So you may not need access to this criminal law information. You may never think about the comparative piece, but it sure was nice to have access to that information, right? And I had already put this resource together, so it was my pleasure to share it with you all this evening. At least for me, where I'm at, this is evening. Uh, this is Legally Everywhere channel. Well, because we're legally everywhere looking into everything. I wish you all a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed this show and tell. It was a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I got to show you 3 pages, so I'm so excited. Hopefully you're excited. Hopefully you get to see the anchors that I have on my channel. Hopefully you've been able to see the Legally Everywhere framework I have, some of the news, the way we um, look through the news, the questions that we ask, the engagement that we have on the channel. I've been thoroughly enjoying getting on this mobile live, talking to you guys, and really just getting some feedback from you, getting your opinions, and once again, just having lively discussions, because it's so important. That's why I call it the receipt buffet. I got a little bit of everything on here with regards to the various angles of conversation in that Legally Everywhere framework. You all have a wonderful evening, and I will see you in I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself next time.